Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another session of Generative AI in Azure. So, my name is David, and I have with me today Kenny. How are you doing, Kenny?
I'm fine. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good, thanks. So, your voice is still very low, I think, from last week. From last week, how's the mic? Is the microphone connected to the system? Is it selecting the right one? Oh, for some reason, okay, yeah, we'll probably try to sort that out, like maybe like stuff. So if you check, I think the maybe maybe the stream it may not be picking up the right microphone. Well, anyways, so welcome everyone again. Thanks very much for joining us. So we're going to pick things up from where we stopped last week. Still talking about the use of generative AI in Azure. And if I remember correctly, last week we started by saying many times when we talk about generative AI, people want to go straight into let's start building things, right? Let's start creating things. However, there are many use cases where we can leverage existing generative AI integrations that Microsoft has to offer. And last week, we talked about the first option, which was Copilot for Azure. So, Copilot for Azure is a generative AI assistant that's embedded into the Azure portal, but it can also be used from other tools like IDEs like Visual Studio Code. So today we're going to carry on that path, and today's course will be more practical. So I'll be showing more demonstrations than just talking. Okay, so let's get into it. So by the way, again, thanks very much everyone for joining us. I can see we have a few people online, so thanks for joining. Hey, yeah, thanks. Um, Thanks, Tag Rugby. Thanks, Apocalypse. That's a very interesting name. So, Kenny, how about you? How's your week been, by the way? Been a good week?
Been a busy week.
Busy one?
Yeah.
We really need to work on your microphone. So, remind me to check on that later. And remind us to test that later. So, I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen and then we go from there. So, let's go to screen share and let's go to share my screen and I'll be sharing this screen. So can you see my screen now? So I can see that my screen is showing on the screen. So nice. So last week we said we talked about we talked about Copilot for Azure as one of the existing generative AI integrations that we can use. So Kenny, I've got a question for you. True or false question? Copilot for Azure can be used to start and stop virtual machines in Azure. Is that true or is that false? Remember, we did a demo the last 2 weeks.
I didn't get the
Hello.
question.
So the question was Copilot for Azure is a generative AI assistant, right?
Yes.
That we can use to integrate with Azure. So can we use it to take actions in Azure? For example, can we use it to start a virtual machine? Can we use it to stop a virtual machine in Azure? Or we can only just ask it questions. So is it, yep,
Mm, true.
true. So we can use it to start and stop virtual machines. And that answer would be correct because last time we actually demonstrated it. Remember when I said start a virtual machine, stop a virtual machine that's running, and it says, hey, yeah, I can go ahead and I can run that for you. So today I'll be introducing another tool, another generative AI tool that we can use to integrate with Azure. This time around, the tool that we'll be introducing is a tool called GitHub Copilot for Azure. Have you used GitHub Copilot before, Kenny? Is it something that you've heard about before, or have you heard about it before?
I've heard about it before, but I haven't used it.
Yeah. So, like from what you've heard about it, what does it do? So, GitHub Copilot, not GitHub Copilot for Azure now, just GitHub Copilot.
It's up Copilot.
Yeah.
I can
So it's
see it
very
here.
popular around. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and I'll explain. And by the way, if you know the answer, anyone in the audience, go ahead and put the answer in the chat window, and we'll bring it up on the screen. So Kenny and I will just be having a conversation as we go through this. So GitHub Copilot, Kenny, it's an IDE assistant, or yeah, it's an assistant, a generative AI assistant that developers can use to write code, or that developers can do. Oh, thanks very much, Mr. Pukwala. Thanks for joining. So that developers can use to write code, developers can use to edit code, developers can use, yep. So I can see Apocalypse says code reviewer, creating tasks. So it's an AI assistant tool for developers. So it's essentially something that developers use. So I can see issues, validating PR, awesome. So there's a lot of use cases for that. But what Microsoft has is Microsoft has an extension called GitHub Copilot for Azure that we can use. So here's one of the things that I'll walk you through very, very quickly in terms of leveraging this tool, this Copilot for Azure. There's a few things that you need in order for you to be able to use this. Of course, number one is you need an Azure subscription. So you need access to an Azure subscription. An Azure subscription is like an Azure account. Number two, you need a GitHub Copilot license. A GitHub Copilot license. So this is one of my assignments for you, by the way, Kenny, which would be, you will need to make sure that, number one, you get an Azure subscription, you get your access to an Azure subscription. Number two, you need to make sure that you get a GitHub Copilot license. Now, for GitHub Copilot licensing, there are different options that exist. The good thing about it is that there is a free option. So let me go ahead and bring up something on my screen. And what I'll bring up on my screen will show you the different options that exist. So here are the different options that exist. Number one, we have the free option, which is good. We have the free option of GitHub Copilot. We have the Pro option, which is about $10 per user per month. We have the Pro Plus option. We have the business option. We have the enterprise option. For now, I'll just show you like some of the key differences between the more common options. So we have free, pro, and then we have business. One of the things that you see in terms of the differences between these is that you see that with the free, we can get about 2,000 completions every month, whereas and we can get 50 slow premium requests every month. With the Pro, we can get unlimited completions every month, and we can get 500 fast premium requests every month and unlimited slow premium requests every month. So just keep that in mind. So anyone can just go sign up for GitHub, and when you sign up for GitHub, just you get a free version of GitHub Copilot that you can use. So if you're using GitHub, if you want to use GitHub Copilot for assistance, again, you need an Azure subscription, you need the GitHub Copilot license. What else do we need? There are other extensions that we're going to need to have. So, and I'll show this to you very, very quickly. So the other thing that we'll need to have is we'll need to have in Visual Studio Code, we'll need to have a GitHub Copilot extension installed. We'll need to have the GitHub Copilot chat extension installed. So there are different things. We'll also need to have the Azure Tools extension pack installed. Extension pack installed. And finally, there are 4 things that we need to have installed. We need to have the Azure Resources extension installed. So what I'm going to do, Kenny, very, very quickly, is I'm going to go to show you this. So I already have an Azure subscription, so I'm good. I already have a GitHub Copilot license, but I'm going to go install this extension in Visual Studio Code so that I can make the most effective use of GitHub Copilot for Azure. So here I have an environment where I have Visual Studio Code. I'll go straight under extensions and I'll go look for the extensions that I talked about. So the first one will be the GitHub Copilot extension. So I'll search for that. So GitHub Copilot, and you can see GitHub Copilot there. You can see GitHub Copilot chat. So I'll install both of them. So if you install one, it installs the other. So you can see it installed both of them. The other thing that I'll need to install, you can see it right here. It says GitHub Copilot for Azure. So I'll need to install that. But before I install GitHub Copilot for Azure, I'm going to install the Azure extension pack. So I'll look for the Azure Tools extension pack. So this one. So what this does is an extension pack. It contains about 11 extensions that allows us to be able to manage different Azure services. It also includes GitHub Copilot extension within the extension pack, but it also includes other extensions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this extension pack, and that will install all the 11 extensions. There's one more extension that I need to install, and that extension will need to be the Azure Resources extension. So while that is installing, I'll go to the Azure Resources extension. So that's the extension there. And actually, it's already part of the extension pack. So you can see that it's already installing the Azure Resources extension. So those are the key things that we need to install, and I've just installed all 4 of them. So it's not difficult, right, Kenny? It's really straightforward. Or what do you think?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is really straightforward. But then the question that we want to go to. So thanks very much. I can see Tolu says, so you can see code completion. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I can see Tolu says Copilot is an assistant for code writing in an IDE. That's absolutely correct. So it's a coding assistant, generative AI coding assistant, essentially. So, but we want to see how we can use this for Azure. So if you want to use it for Azure, we need to install an extension called GitHub Copilot for Azure. So let's go back to what we've done so far. So we have this. So all the extensions should have been installed now. So the first thing that I'll do, Kenny, is that I'll log into my Azure account. So if I want to log into my Azure account, I can see the Azure icon on the left-hand side. And I can see the option at the top where it says sign into Azure. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on sign into Azure. It says it's going to open the browser window. I'm okay to do that. So I'll go ahead and I'll sign into Azure. So let's sign in with my account. And I'll just get my MFA ready here. And it's prompting me. So interesting. So it's asking for, let's see if it's going to use my security key. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So let's go to other ways to sign in very quickly. Approve and authenticate our requests. Yep. So that's just coming now. I'll approve that and I'll sign in. So I'm signing into Azure in Visual Studio Code. So once I'm signed into Azure, so the other thing that I'll do is I'll also sign into GitHub Copilot. So that's the first thing. So sign into Azure first. And the other thing is I'll need to sign into GitHub Copilot. So by the way, on the right-hand side, you can see GitHub Copilot chat already open. Or if you look below here, it says signed out. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to say sign in to use Copilot. And then it's going to prompt me to say I want to sign in. I click on sign in. It's going to open the window to sign in to GitHub. So that's how it's going to check if I've got my free license. So again, there's a free license that you can use. So I'll just go ahead and put in my credentials. I'll put in my credentials and I'll put in my password very quickly. And again, it's going to ask me for MFA. I use MFA everywhere. By the way, do you follow that practice also, Kenny? Do you use MFA everywhere? Nice. Awesome. That is really, really good. Has this ever happened to you? You're using MFA everywhere and then you forgot your phone or you lost your phone. It's
Yeah,
not a
but
good experience. It's not a good experience. It happened to me before. I went to help out like one of my sisters, and I traveled over to her place, and then I got to her place, and then I like, where's my phone? And I I forgot my phone, and yeah, it wasn't a good experience essentially. I wasn't able to do anything on my laptop. Like everything I try to do is like, we've sent the notification to your phone. It's not a good one. It just shows you how much we rely on technology, right? So any little thing, you can't do anything. By the way, do you think that's what's going to happen here? Because a lot of us are relying more and more on this AI assistant. Are we going to lead ourselves to a situation where we get so reliant on these AI assistants that without them we can't really do anything? I'm not
for me,
sure. Yeah, go
definitely
ahead.
have to be a balance between use of AI assistants so that we don't get solely dependent on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think I agree with you because maybe there are some basic like human survival skills that we still have to try to learn and not rely on AI for like everything. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on that. What was the latest AI assistant that you tried like recently? What was the most recent one that you tried?
I basically use a lot of DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and Copilot too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. That's but those are like the very common ones. I'll tell you
Yeah.
one that I tried recently. I tried one recently, which is part of an application called GenSpark. So it's called GenSpark AI. So they have an assistant, they have an agent that can be like your personal assistant. So I can ask it to call somebody on my behalf. So I tried it like this week and I asked it to call my wife. I was like, call my wife, tell her this information. Oh, I can see perplexities, So I asked her, like, call my wife, tell her this information, and get the reply back from me. And the AI agent called my wife, and my wife picked up the phone. I was like, who is this? Hello, I'm David's AI assistant. Just cut the line. She was like, no. And I was like, why didn't you speak to my AI? My assistant called you and you cut the line. So yeah, that's true. I completely agree, Kokola. It's once you're relying on that. Perplexity is a very interesting tool also. It's one that I've tried before. I'm not really like a fan, but it's a very interesting tool. Anyways, I think GitHub authentication should be completed now. I think I've already done my MFA, so I think that we should be good. Um, so for some reason, it's just taking a while, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to restart GitHub Copilot. Okay, it says getting GitHub Copilot ready. I'm not sure why it's taking a long time to get it ready, so I'm just going to restart it anyways. So let's restart it. It's still saying signed out, so I'm going to try to sign in again. So let's go to sign in. Sign in with the GitHub account and continue. Allow, open. There we go. So now finally we've got GitHub Copilot now installed. So one of the key things to note, if you're going to be using GitHub Copilot for Azure, there are three modes that GitHub Copilot has. You can see those three modes in the lower right corner here. You have the agent mode, the ask mode, and the edit mode. What's the difference between these three modes? I'll explain that to you very, very quickly. Number one mode is the ask mode. The ask mode is very straightforward. You want to ask questions about Azure, you can use the ask mode. Now, how do I do this in Azure? What commands do I use to do this in Azure? For example, I can go to GitHub Copilot. If I wanted to use the GitHub Copilot for Azure extension, which I installed, I can use at Azure, and you can see it's got at Azure here. And I can start asking it questions. What command can I use to create an Azure AI Foundry resource, which we'll talk about in this series later. Talk about Azure AI Foundry. So, I'm using the GitHub Copilot for Azure extension. So that's why I said at Azure, and then I give a prompt. So in this case, it's already signed in. So anyways, just going to select that. And what that's going to do is that, again, it's going to go, talk to the LLM so you can see the different models that it has access to use, GPT 4.1, GPT 4.0, and some of the others. So here is one quick thing to mention, Kenny. When you're using GitHub Copilot and you're using GitHub Copilot for Azure, pay attention to these two sections. So you see here, it says standard models, and here it says premium models. And on the right-hand side, you can see something like 0.33x, 1x. You can see some of them are 10x. Do you know what that means? Yeah, Kenny, what do you think those means?
I don't
Like
know.
those 1x, 10x, 1.25x. So anyone knows what that means in the chat window, feel free to put that in the chat window. But while you're doing that, I'll explain what that means. What that means, this is talking about the costs that you're going to pay for using these models. Because not all models are equal, right? Some of them consume compute more than others. They consume CPU more than others. So if you're going to be using some of the high-end models like Claude Opus 4, which is Claude's latest model, or if you're going to be using a reasoning model like the O1 model, that's going to cost you 10 times more than if you're using the O3 model. So essentially, if you're using the free edition, yeah, just be a little bit careful. I showed this to you earlier. Let me bring this up again. So remember, I showed this to you earlier. I said when you're using free, you have 50 slow premium requests every month. Well, if you start using the high-end 10x options, that means you're only going to you only have a few times that you're going to be able to make any request before you run out of requests to use. So when you're making requests, if you can use lower models, that's not going to charge you as much. Make sure you use the lower models, where possible, so that it's not going to use up all the requests that you have. So anyways, you can see that we can ask it different questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? So that's the ask mode. Can ask different questions. The edit mode is a little bit more powerful than the ask mode. With the edit mode, what you can actually get it to do is you can get it to look at your files and propose changes to you. So for example, let's go create a new folder. Let's go to downloads. I'm just going to say, create a new folder called Azure Projects, and select my Azure Project folder and open the folder here. And let's open the folder. So, and within this folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to say, Azure deployments.tf. TF stands for Terraform. So Azure deployments.tf for Terraform. And I'm going to open my GitHub Copilot chat, and I have GitHub Copilot for Azure installed. So what I can do here is when I'm chatting with this, I switch it to like the edit mode, and I say, edit the file to include an Azure storage resource. So now I'm in the edit mode, right? So I'm currently like in the Terraform file. So let's go to that. So add the files we modified to working sets. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go to do code base. And then let's ask that question again. So let's do add code base, and let's do that again. And you can see that it's looking for that. Yeah, So you can see here it's interacting with my files. It found that I've got a file called Azure deployments.tf. So it's giving me some suggestions. Yeah, but here you can see what it's done here. It's added the code directly into my file, right? So that's on the edit mode. Now, I can choose to accept it. If I click on that, it's going to keep it. Or I can say, no, I don't like this. This doesn't fit what I want. Therefore, I want to remove that. And I can click on that and it's going to undo the change, right? So this is more like, say, I can make edit for you. So that's the edit mode. But you see this third option, that is the powerful mode, the agent mode. The agent mode is more powerful than both the ask mode and the edit mode. So what does the agent mode do? What's the power behind like the agent mode? Here is the power behind the agent mode. The agent mode allows us to make complex requests, and GitHub Copilot, using GitHub Copilot for Azure and other tools, it's going to create a plan to complete all the requests that we make. So for example, this one is basically like, do this and everything like that. So let's say I want to do something more complex. Let's do something more complex. Let's do something like create a new application that's going to talk to an Azure service. Why not? Let's go do that. Let's do that very, very quickly. I'm just going to bring up a sample prompt here. And I'm going to do something like, let's say, switch that to agent mode. And I'm going to say, create let's say, let's do that. Create an Azure storage account. And connect a file, connect to a file to upload app. So let's run that. And by the way, I'll just go ahead and undo this one. So this time it's going to just create something for me. So anyways, yeah, I'm not just asking it to just make a simple edit. I'm asking it to create an Azure storage account, connect to a file, upload and connect it to a file that can upload and connect it to a file to upload app. So it's going to connect it to an application. So go ahead and do that in agent mode. So if I go ahead and I run that, so here you can see that it's going to create a plan and it's going to essentially take on like my process and it's going to start trying to fulfill that process. So while this one is doing this, let me open Visual Studio Code and give you additional information about the agent mode if you're using GitHub Copilot for Azure. So here's some information that you should be aware of. Number one with the agent mode is that the agent mode has access to many tools. So for example, if you want to know which tools does it have access to, you can ask it. You can say, what are your tools? So what are your tools? So I'm in the agent mode. So, and what it's going to do is that it's going to look through and it's going to tell me what tools it has access to. So you can see that it's telling me it has access to some tools that it can use to create file. So that means this agent can create files for me, it can read files, it can replace string in file, it can list directories, it can set for files on my system. It has tools that it can use to analyze code. It has tools that it can use to run commands in the terminal to get the output from the terminal. It has tools that it can use to install an extension. So look at that. So I can actually ask the agent to install an extension for me, and it will act on that. And the way that it's going to act on that is that it's going to use this install extension tool to perform that action. It has tools to create new Jupyter notebooks, to edit notebook file. And you can see all the Azure tools that it has. It has tools to sign into Azure, to sign out of Azure, to create Azure infrastructure as code, to create and run load testing for me in Azure. It has tools to fetch external web pages. So there's a lot of tools that it has access to out of the box that we can use with these powerful agents. No, so Apocalypse. So we're building up to that Apocalypse. So what was Apocalypse said? Are we going to manipulate AI Studio? We're going to get to that. So we're building the foundation. So the foundation is, let's see how we can use existing AI assistants to optimize how we interact with Azure. Then after that, we're going to get into the other part of, let's start creating our own agents using Azure AI services, using Azure Foundry tools, right? So a lot of people want to jump straight into creating things. But I think that it means like an important foundational layer in terms of how to leverage existing options that are available to be more efficient, essentially. So that's where we're getting to. I hope that makes sense. So you can see like the tools that it has access to. For example, it has access to this tool to install an extension. So for example, let me try that out. If I go to under extensions, let's look for an extension that's not installed. So there's this dev containers extension. It is not yet installed. So let's see if the agent mode can install it for me. So install the dev containers extension. And I press enter to that. What it's going to do is that it's going to look through its tool set and say, do I have a tool that I can use to perform this action? If it finds the tool, and you can see it's like, hey, I found a tool that I can use. Copilot will install the extension, and I can click on continue. And what it's going to do then is it's going to use that to install the dev containers extension for me. And you can see there, it's already now installed this extension, and I no longer see the install option. So it automatically performed that option. So that's the agent mode of GitHub Copilot, which we can also leverage for GitHub Copilot for Azure. So let's see, like the one that I was doing earlier. So if you have a look at this, so this is the agent mode. This is the power of the agent mode, Kenny. If you look at what it's done here, is that I just gave it a single instruction. Like, can you create an Azure storage account and then do that? And it's gone ahead and it's created about 6 or 7 new files for me. And I can go ahead and I can keep all of that, and it's giving me instructions on how I can run that. It's like, just go to here, run this command in the terminal, and we can use that to validate. So actually I can go run that. I can click on continue, and it will actually run that for me. So you can see it's running that, and it's like, hey, I'm trying to run that, but in this case, I don't think I have Terraform installed on this system. So in this case, it's going to fail and everything like that. So, but that's the power of the agent mode. What else do we need to know? Because we're going to round up now in terms of GitHub Copilot for Azure. So we've talked about the pricing. We've talked about the different modes. There's a whole lot of things that we can use this for. So if you just want to practice with GitHub Copilot for Azure, again, just use the @Azure. Just use @Azure. Or let's go back to the other one. Choose @Azure. And let's switch to that. Oh, okay, one minute, sorry. Let's go to that. Okay, let's go to the Ask mode, and let's do @Azure. That was the reason why. So if I do @Azure, you can see many different commands that you can use. If you want to learn, if you want to get feedback, if you want to check the cost, if you want to change the tenant. It also has different shortcuts that you can use. If you use the #, it's going to give you like different shortcuts that you can use. So I can see different shortcuts. For example, if I want to get my authentication state, am I authenticated to Azure? I can get my authentication state by using that shortcut. And you can see it's checking that. So it says it's signed in equals to true. So I'm signed in, and it shows me the account that I'm signed in with. So I use that to check my authentication state. I can change my subscription that I'm connected to. So maybe if I have access to multiple Azure tenants, I can get the available tenants that I have access to. So if I run that, it's going to tell me all the tenants that I have access to. And if I want to switch, I can go ahead and I can switch it also. So it has many powerful options in terms of what we can use. So let's go to Azure. So in this case, it's checking what tenants do I have access to. So using get available tenants. And it's currently running that. And here it's listed all the available tenants that I've got access to. And again, if I wanted to do like other things, I can go to use the hash sign, and I can say maybe if I want to change the tenant, I have the option here to change the tenant. So get current tenant, get available tenant. I can also change the tenant. So if I just start typing tenants, I can set current tenant. I can change all of that also if I wanted. So I can do the same thing for subscriptions. If I want to set a default tenant, anytime I connect to GitHub Copilot, I can go to under settings, and under settings here, and I can go search for the option to change or to set a default tenant. So if I wanted to do that, there is an option that I can use here. So if I do chat dot agent, or another way I can get to that is if I go to under, let's go to under, if I want to set my default tenant, there's an option that's just keeping my mind now under GitHub Copilot for Azure. So let's go to under extensions. Let's go look for GitHub Copilot for Azure. And GitHub Copilot for Azure, no, not that one, this one, GitHub Copilot for Azure. I go to under manage, and if I go to under settings here, so this is the one, and I can go set a default tenant. If I have access to multiple tenants, I can set a default one, so that it's going to use that default tenant anytime I open up Visual Studio Code. And anytime I'm running instructions, it's going to run instructions against that tenant. Okay, so I think that we're probably going to stop there for today. So that's the other layer. There's one more thing that I'm going to talk about the next 2 weeks, which is how do we extend the tools that GitHub Copilot has when we're dealing with Azure. So for example, I showed you how you can check the default tools that it has. So you saw like how we can say, what are your tools? And it's going to give us a list of all the tools that it has access to. But what if I want to add additional tools to do things in Azure? How do I do that? Many of you must have heard of something called MCP. So Ken, is that something that you've heard about, MCP?
No.
So MCP is a very interesting one, because what MCP allows us to do, it's a protocol. What it allows us to, it allows us to connect additional tools to agents like GitHub Copilot. So you have all these built-in tools that it has. But what if I want to add additional tools to it? We can use MCP to do that. The way that many people describe it, MCP is like it's the USB for agents. So if you think about it, like you have your laptop, and your laptop has a USB port. So it doesn't matter any hardware device that you want to connect to your laptop, you probably connect that hardware using your USB port. So you want to connect a webcam, plug in the webcam into the USB port. You want to connect a microphone or a speaker, plug it into the USB port. You want to connect some other device, plug it into the USB port. So the USB port is a universal port for connecting hardware devices to your PC. And it's the same with MCP. So you want to connect any tool to your agent, just plug it in as an MCP, and your client will be able to connect to it. So what I'll show the next 2 weeks is how we can take, Microsoft just announced a MCP called MCP for Azure. So that's something that Microsoft announced just a few weeks ago, actually. So MCP for Azure was announced just a few weeks ago. Or actually, let's see. Yeah, it's a few weeks ago. So Microsoft's the Azure MCP server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the Azure MCP server, how we can plug it in into GitHub Copilot and some of the capabilities that it has. And then once we're done with that, then we can go into how do we use AI Foundry? How do we build our own agents? So, any questions? Does anybody have any questions from what we've covered today? Kenny, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Everything makes sense a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Anybody has any questions before we bring this session to a close today? Any questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, if any question comes to your mind later, feel free to reach out to any of us. If you reach out to Kenny, Kenny will be able to answer you. You promise, Kenny, you'll be able to be able to answer people. So if you have any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Kenny. We'll be happy to address that. But if you have any questions now, put it in the chat window. I'll be happy to address any questions that you may have. But if there are no questions, we'll stop there for today and we'll pick it up from there, talking about Azure MCP Server in the next 2 weeks. So have a lovely rest of the morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining from, and see you next time. So bye for now.